So the moderator tonight was from CBS, and we were quite disgruntled at her framing. And so now we've said that in the summary of our debate, but we want to prove it out to you. So we're going to go to different questions that she asked here and give you a sense of why we thought the whole debate was on right-wing grounds. So let's go to the first question.
Of Social Security. In 18 years, when the Social Security trust funds run out of money, you'll be 76. The Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget estimates your benefits could be cut by as much as $7,500 per year. What would your administration do to prevent this cut?
So that was early on in the debate, and the framing is...
Hey, when your social programs that completely fall apart, that's what she said.
Yeah, that's right. Now, what she didn't tell you is that Social Security has about a $2 trillion surplus, not deficit. Now, you could have framed the question that way. You could have framed it as, is the most popular program in American history. No, but you didn't choose to frame it that way. You chose to frame it from a right-wing perspective, that decades from now, that it cannot pay 100% of what it pays today if you don't change anything. Right?
Yeah.
None of those assumptions are justified, by the way, and they don't happen for decades.
Mike Pence, what's your response to the idea that we could simply raise the payroll tax cap and never have to have this conversation again?
That would be one framing.
That seems simple enough.
I think he would say,
ridiculous.
That's the Pence strategy for the whole night. So that's your framing on Social Security. It's falling apart. What do we? And the answer she's looking for is cut it, because that's what the rich want you to do. They want you to cut your Social Security so they don't have to pay as much taxes. Okay, now let's go to the second question. This is supposed to be about police brutality, but look at the framing instead.
Law enforcement and race relations. After the Dallas police shooting, Police Chief David Brown said, quote, "We're asking cops to do too much in this country. Every societal failure, we put it off on the cops to solve. Not enough mental health funding, not enough drug addiction funding. Schools fail. Let's give it to the cops." Do we ask too much of police officers in this country?
So one way of framing that could have been unarmed black men get shot at 5 times the rate of unarmed white men in this country. Do we ask too much of black citizens to get murdered in the streets by cops? Now, okay, people would have flipped. How dare you? That is so liberal. But wait a minute, that is just as conservative to say, I know that unarmed black men keep getting shot in the streets, unarmed, unwarranted, unprovoked oftentimes. But do we ask too much of the cops? Okay, so understand the framing. You're in a box. The mainstream media puts you in a box, and it's not the answers, it's the questions.
Yeah.
Okay, we're not anywhere near done. Roll the next question.
Do you think the world today is a safer or more dangerous place than it was 8 years ago? Has the terrorist threat increased or decreased? Senator Kaine. Governor Pence, Mr. Trump has proposed extreme vetting of immigrants from parts of the world that export terrorism. But that does not address many of the recent terrorist attacks in the United States, such as the Orlando nightclub massacre and the recent bombings in New York and New Jersey. Those were homegrown, committed by U.S. citizens and legal residents. What specific tools would you use to prevent those kinds of attacks?
This was one of about 20 questions on terrorism. Yeah. Terrorism, you are in a lot of danger. Danger, danger, be afraid, be afraid. What are you going to do? I mean, we're less safe than we were 8 years ago, weren't we? Or maybe we're more safe, but I don't know. I feel unsafe. There's terrorism everywhere.
I love the idea that she simply asks, do you think it is worse or better than 8 years ago? Because I do not have access to a computer that will show me that not only are we safer than we were 8 years ago, you as a human are literally safer than any human has ever been throughout the history of our species. Deaths in war are down. Deaths in terrorism are down drastically over 20 or 30 years ago. Violent crime is down. Overall, you are so goddamn safe. The only reason that you find what I'm saying to be a little bit weird is because the people in the media and people in politics tell you every friggin' day that you're about to be shot either by an illegal immigrant or some minority or you're going to be killed by a terrorist.
That is, I don't know that we can add anything to what John just said.
Look
at the numbers.
No, Cenk, we have to worry about the threat from Iran.
Which leads us to the next question.
Governor, I will give you 30 seconds to respond because I know you want to. But again, I would remind you both this was about North Korea.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
Look at her.
Okay. And let's all remember, look, that was actually one of her better lines. But
Yes.
the answer,
good.
the question is always either Russia, Syria, homegrown terrorism, or North Korea. Now, should we talk about mass shootings that kill thousands upon thousands of Americans?
To be fair, homegrown Islamic terrorism.
Okay.
Let's not talk about other sorts of homegrown
No.
terrorism
Mass
in
shootings that
America.
terrorize every community we're in, and every time that it happens, someone in the news says, I didn't think it would happen in my town. Well, it's going to happen in your town because it happens in every town, but shh, we're in a box. We're in a box. We're not going to talk about real homegrown things that terrorize us. We're not going to talk about out-of-control shootings. We're not going to talk about gun control. All we're going to do is scare the living crap out of you, out of things that make us profit, okay? Now, if we go to war in all those foreign countries, we profit. Defense contractors profit. Often the oil companies profit. Oftentimes speculators on Wall Street profit. Gun control in America, that would cut our profits. The gun manufacturers would make less money. We're not going to ask you about that because you're in a box.
Yeah.
And so finally, after all of this fear-mongering and nonsense and framing, she got to the real tough question at the end. Let's go to that.
You have both been open about the role that faith has played in your lives. Can you discuss in detail a time when you struggled to balance your personal faith and a public policy position?
Fucking Christ
That's an easy
almighty
one
on a
for me.
hockey
That would
stick.
have been an interesting answer about a question on faith.
I try to spend a few minutes every night on my knees.
What?
That might be the biggest fail, actually.
Yes.
That's what Penn
Or
said.
possibly, there you go, whipping that Mexican thing out again.
When I'm on my knees.
Okay, those are literally the things that were said in the answers to that question. But
Yeah.
no, the much, much bigger fail is, here we go again. So there's not a question about, hey, how do we run a secular country, which is what America is. That's in our Constitution. We're supposed to separate religion and state. We're not supposed to
Right.
establish a religion.
Right.
That is the core of America. We're not going to ask that question. We're not going to ask about logic or facts or reason or science or education. We're not going to ask about any of that. How about free college education? That seemed to be fairly popular in the primaries. We're not going to ask about any of that. We're going to ask you, okay, now guys, go ahead. We're in a faith off. Who's more faithful? Okay. Who loves God more? Okay. Because you're in a box. You're in a box. And the mainstream media is never going to let you out of that box. So what you have to do is crush that box. But luckily, we're on our path. Because that mainstream media, man, you keep this crap up every single day. They're bleeding viewers. Because who looks at that when they're young and they have access to the internet and they know all these other issues? Yes, I get it. People who grew up in this system who are 78 years old and they're like, oh man, no, those were the right questions. Those are the same questions I've been hearing for the last 40, 50 years. They must be the right questions, right? Whereas the young go, no, that was not a real debate. That was a farce. Young Turks membership is awesome.
Says who?
Says me. But
Please believe me.
TYTnetwork.com/join.